an epic movie, they had Jack Sparrow and Magneto and stuff like that before they saw Pirates, they saw X-Men 3 and stuff like that. They just wanted the references.
And a lot of them weren't epic movies. Like they're also smoothing Nacho Libre.
Yeah,
epic movie.
And that's another good example. Nacho Libre was not a hit. They thought it was going to be a hit. That's why they put it in there, but they didn't see the movie. But the reason those don't work is because they're not connecting to the film. They're not connecting to what they're satirizing. It's a reference, you know, hey, this looks like something from X-Men 3, but it's not making fun of it, and it's not connecting to anything they're talking about. The satire has to have a connection to what you're satirizing. And again, it usually has to point out something negative. Now, something with that said, like, you satirize a lot of 80s stuff, or the stuff you satirize, you really like. Like, what's that movie where Ryan O'Neal goes, oh God, oh jeez, oh man, oh geez. What was that?
I know the clip more than I know the movie.
but yeah, it's this line that Ryan O'Neal does that is so horrendously bad and over the top. It's said to be like one of the worst reads of all time.
Yeah, it was a read that wasn't actually intended to be in the movie. But the director really liked it. Screw it, putting it in there. So yeah, with that you get to work with a lot of different cliches, stereotypes within that set genre. They had its sitcoms and stuff from the 80s. I've done a thing called Soft Ethan Cable, which does the 90s softcore Skinamax thing. like Airplane, which is satirizing the airport movies of the 1970s, where it gets really, really, really bad to go along with the epic movie, Meet the Spartans and stuff like that. Something that I think is lower than what a lot of people think puns are, is when it gets so topical in some of their jokes that after 15 minutes, no one's going to know what the hell they're referencing. Like the fact we got that Three Stooges movie out right now that's got Snooki in it. Or Meet the Spartans that had a Sanjaya reference. See? No one remembers that. Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like a San Vagina or something.
Now that's actually a very good thing to bring up too, is making jokes that are dated or timeless. If you can, go for the timeless jokes. But, again, I mean, it's something like Daily Show has to make their living doing jokes that are current. They're literally commenting daily on, you know, the things that are going on. Now, the advantage to that is that they have permission to tell you what they're referencing, because they're technically a news show. So they can say, we're referencing this. So it works a little better. But even then, it's like sometimes they'll start off, like if something happened to them on the show or offset or something like that, they may make a joke at the beginning and not reference what it is. That's like the audience gets it because it's current, but then they'll be dated. So stuff like the Zeitgeist can be done. South Park does it a lot. But South Park usually does stuff that's pretty, like, when it happened, you really remember it. You know, but there are one or two where it's like, they're really dated, and you have to ask, wait, what was that? What was that joke? What was that? And you would forget about it. So that's another important thing to keep in mind if you're doing any kind of topical humor. Again, I fall into this trap too, where I'll look back and I'll make political jokes or something like that, and it does date them, and I'm finding out more and more I have to sort of keep away from that, because it has to be something people can come back to. Now, with that said, yeah, so I mean, the bottom line with satires is that, and puns for that matter, is that the more it can relate to what you're referencing or what you're mocking, the better. And they usually say if you're going to mock something, it has to be something you love. It doesn't have to be, but it does help. Like, because not something you love, you have to have a passion for it. You either have to have a passion for how much you like it, or you have to have a passion for how much you hate it. And surprisingly, for whatever reason, the stuff that people have a passion for liking usually turns out funnier. People love, even before the prequels come out, people love making Star Wars jokes. Yeah, and people love those movies, they adore them. But they love pointing out, you know, why didn't they just cover that patch in the Death Star, you know, so that blows up. Why? It should be pretty easy. You know, well, why didn't the Death Star, while waiting for that planet to pass to destroy the bad guys, just destroy that planet and destroy the planet behind it with the bad guys on it, the good guys on it? You know, there's about 1 million plot holes in it, but people still like it. I treat the people that made that like Star Wars too. So there is something about it, because I guess because you have a passion enough to watch it enough to suddenly put this together and point out the mistakes, you know what, we still like. And again, a lot of the movies you review, I mean, you acknowledge, no, these are terrible, but you love them. You know, a good chunk of them. Yeah, I mean, it's like, you can't stop watching them.
No, yeah, because it is a genre that I grew up watching.
You're about watching E.T. getting...
Yeah. Listen, everybody. Not so much that, but more something like, okay, Caligula, or Caligula, or the slasher movies, or the blaxploitation movies and stuff like that. Maybe more so that than Sasquatch pounding a bunch of people. so yeah, it's fun to work in that genre.
Horny in the Henderson. That's an example of a good one.
The porno spoof titles do puns incredibly well. There's one I got at home. There's a 70s porno spoof of Jaws, and the name of it is Gums. If you don't like it, it's only an hour long.
Someone have sex with a shark?
I haven't watched it yet, but I will. I'll get back to you.
So that's sort of the basic of satire and pun. Now we also have a different kind of humor. Both of us have sort of dabbled with dry humor. This is humor that's not over the top. It's not goofy. The comedy comes from how not invested the person telling the story is. And the reason this can come across as very humorous is because you're usually talking about something that's really extreme, really over the top, really miserable, but you're talking about it in a very nonchalant way, or a way you don't care. A good example, Bob Newhart did a lot of that. Actually, Mark Twain did a lot of that. And there was even this one time where his pauses, when Mark Twain would go up and speak, people actually thought he wasn't a speaker. You know, he was just a guy teeing up, he was just sort of talking. People could hear him, but he just didn't sound that invested and stuff. But when they heard what he was talking about, it was so bizarre and so strange that they realized that, oh, this is part of the act, is that he's talking about stuff that's actually very over the top, but he doesn't care that much about it, and that's where the comedy comes from. Stephen Wright is another great example of that. He does wonderful things. Bob Newhart had a bit, he does these phone routines where he's a person talking on the phone during this very big event. You know, like King Kong would be, you know, climbing, you know, a building, and he was concerned because he was the janitor and he couldn't clean up to a certain floor. And he was trying to figure out how to get rid of the monkey, you know, on the building, but his jurisdiction only goes up to his navel, you know, so he can't get to the head and say, oh, maybe I could cover the Chrysler building with bananas or the blah, 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 you know, and it's this massive thing, but it's like, why would a guy just, he's still concerned about his job, you know, just as the janitor and cleaning the place and stuff like that. So deadpan humor to very big, over-the-top stuff can go over really well also, depending on how you deliver it. That's another tricky one, though, because you have to know where to put the pauses, where to have the build-up, where to not deliver, as opposed to where to deliver. So it's tricky, but it requires a lot of practice. Let's go to, let me double check, see how we're doing on that time here. Oh yeah, we're doing it. Actually, I'll skip around here. Well, with the deadpan humor, I'm going to go to American humor versus European humor, because there's a very clear difference, but they're also very similar. I'll tell you how. Okay, American humor. Let's take two very famous sketch shows: Saturday Night Live and Monty Python. You know, one from America, one from Britain. American humor. You got a really serious situation. You have the president there, you know, and something like that. He's going to give this great big speech. And you have someone who's really over the top, and he comes in, he's making an ass of himself, and he's saying all this ridiculous stuff in this very proper place. Well, what is up with this guy? Blah, blah, blah. The focus is the person being over the top, silly, and so forth. That's most American humor. There's variations, but that's most American humor. British humor. Let's look at Monty Python. Monty Python, the people are very serious. The people are very stern. The subject matter is stupid as hell. You can have John Cleese, I mean, very dignified, very, you know, proper, I mean, almost intimidating. You know, he can be standing there, if he was just standing here looking at you, you know, with these big eyes, you know, he'd be very intimidating. Once he starts doing this, though, with his face, it's hilarious. Yeah, the Ministry of Silly Walks. And both can work. Now, the thing with the European humor, with something like Python, is they really enjoy the silly, they enjoy the surreal. So for me, it's a little bit more unexpected. I like that. I like something that you don't quite see coming. Though I do find, maybe you've seen this too, if you watch them in a row, like the My Pythons in a row, you can start to pick up some of the punchlines. Like, I know what they're going to try and do, because they're going to try it, you know. They're going to think you're going to this joke, but then they're going here.
Yeah.
And where that can backfire as well is, again, it's, Family Guy actually had a great reference about this. They were talking about, you know, what was it? Somebody was torturing Meg by showing her the Monty Python sketches that weren't really funny, they're just kind of odd and don't go anywhere. And that is part of the risk when you do surreal, silly humor, is that you are going to come across those, and if you do start watching them in the row, there are a lot of those jokes that just sort of die, and they're just kind of awkward, and you're scratching your head. But then you'll get something really, that's just so crazy, so insane, that you can't help but laugh at, like the Spam sketch. I still don't get that. But it's fun. It's so bizarre, but you're laughing at just how strange it is. Why would these, you know, why do they keep saying Spam over and over and over? Why are there Vikings in that place? You know, why do they sing songs to press meat? You know, well, what is the purpose? It's just so bizarre, and for whatever reason, it really tickles your silly bone. Another good example, I'm curious if you like the show, Ren and Stimpy. Now, I'd like to hear, now, why, you do like that show?
Oh, yeah.
Why do you like that show?
Because it's funny. It's funny, and it's I don't know, like, it's gross out humor done pretty well. Done so, I don't know, just exploitively over the top in a way, and so gruesome in how it almost switches its style of animation when it gets really gross. And it's just jarring, and some of it is even is very satirical in a way, where you have a board game called Don't Whiz on the Electric Fence. Honestly seems like a board game I would have had as a kid.
It teaches you a lesson.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Yak Shaving Day, you know, making fun of silly holidays, you know, Powder Toast Man, and the talking horse who's using kitty litter. But it's, again, it's how it's done. It's so genuine in how it's done, and the characters are likable enough and charismatic enough that they sell this very weird material.
And that's it. Ren and Stimpy was very, very weird, and everyone can get into it, but what it did have is that it could really find that place where it knew it was odd, it knew it was weird, and it could put a lot of emphasis, you know, like really dramatic adult emphasis on something so goofy or silly, like just trying to make Ren happy and trying to make him smile, you know, with this machine. You know, it can turn into like this big dramatic thing, and like I said, it can be grotesque and weird and ugly, you know, stuff like that, but the music can be so chipper and happy, and the eyes are so big and extreme, and you don't know what to make of it, but it's just so intense and being shoved in your face, you can't help but laugh at it. And that humor, again, is tough to do, and it's even tougher to sell. But it can be done, and it can get a huge laugh. A good example, a lot of them don't work, but some do, like these YouTube poops you'll see. You know, a lot of them don't work. every once in a while, you know you've seen that one. Where you're just like, this is so dumb, why the hell am I laughing at it? There's just something very particular about that silliness. And I think a lot of it plays with the expectation, what you think you're going to get and what you're actually getting. And playing with the patience of how long it can do something or how short it can do something. And throwing so much at you very fast. And just putting you in a different world that you're not used to or a different comfort zone. And you're just so thrown off and you don't know what to think of it. But you know it's okay to laugh at it. And that's sort of the secret to silly humor, is that you can be put in a very uncomfortable place, but you know it's okay to enjoy it. You know, it's okay to laugh at it. With that said, it'd be okay to laugh at things. Let's talk about gross out / shock humor. And this is stuff that, you know, a lot of people don't like shock humor. A lot of people don't like stuff that you're not supposed to talk about. You know, some things, you know, people would argue for good reason. But again, the reason so many people do it, and I can be a big fan of shock humor. Certainly, if you see my Ask That Kaiju, you know that's or even what he reviewed, for God's sake. I mean, it's like just the most demented
dancing naked on the porch.
Or even just what you review. I mean, it's just like, it is very much a shock humor. And I think the reason it's important, and for me, there's no such thing as a subject matter that you can't talk about. The reason it's important is because, the reason humor is so important is because it's a device to help you adapt, and to help you adjust and evolve and move on with bad things that are happening to you. It's a way of saying, oh, this bad thing that's happening, that's part of life. You know, and it's okay, and I can laugh at this, and I can move on, I can get better. I'm not going to be stuck in this position. And shock humor is a very good way of finding that, and really sort of busting through and saying, hey, you can laugh at this, or there's something to find the humor here, because really, and this is the sad thing about people that do shock humor a lot of times, is that people think they're trying to put me in a bad spot. Actually, they're not. They're trying to get you out of that bad spot. They're trying to, you know, take something that's very uncomfortable to you. It could be murder, or abortion, or stem cell research, whatever, execution, or whatever. All this stuff that can be really uncomfortable to you, and just shove it in your face and say, look, we're humans, we're people. You know, and this is here, and pretending it's not here isn't going to make it go away. We have to see that it's here. And, you know, not only that, you can see that this is just a part of who we are. So for that reason, I think shock humor is very important. It can be done wrong, and many times it is. My grandfather had a great saying. He said, because he was a fan of shock humor and gross out humor and stuff like that, he said, if it's more funny than it is shocking, it's okay. If it's more shocking than it is funny, it's just more shocking than it is funny. You know, and why would you want that? So you still have to find the humor of a situation. You still have to see why this can be laughed at. That's your job when you're doing shock humor, is that you're finding the humor in something that a lot of people can't find humor. And in my opinion, what I was saying before about there's no subject matter that can't be talked about, I still stand by that. However, I do believe that there is a matter, I believe very strongly, in timing. Timing! And what I mean by that is that, like, for example, a lot of people have heard or even made Hitler jokes. You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, or Nazi jokes and stuff like that. But if you were to make that during World War II or anything like that, actually, a lot of people did. But a lot of people would argue this is a pain that's still too close. People are dying in concentration camps, and this monster is in charge of it and stuff like that. And it's still too close. It's still too painful. And you do have to let people sort of go through this mourning and this acceptance of what's going on. It's not like laughter is always the best medicine. You know, laughter has its place. It's very important, but it has its time as well. I mean, that's why people do say timing is so important, because if you get it wrong, especially on something that's very shocking or controversial or emotional to people, you can really hurt, you know, with it. So that's why I think it's very important to know when to use it. With that said, for example, as I was saying with everything done in Misery, the quote-unquote funniest joke ever made you know, scientifically, this is the funniest joke ever made, and it's cute. But statistically, the most people laugh at this and get the biggest reaction. Two hunters are in the woods. One accidentally shoots the other, thinking he's a deer. He goes, "Oh my God!" And he dials 911. He says, "911, 911, I shot my friend here. I think he's dead. I think he's dead." The operator says, "Okay, sir, first things first, I want you to go and make sure he's really dead." The guy goes over, shoots him in the head. "Okay, now what?" It's actually a pretty decent joke. So I would argue it's not the funniest, but I think it's a decent joke. But now let's get down to all seriousness here. A person has died. It was a life. You know, a person has been, and not like that person who shot him didn't know any better. That's making fun of people that don't have the mental capacity for a lot of this stuff, or people with learning disability. That person's going to be scarred for life. He shot his best friend not knowing any better. He could have saved him, but now he's probably going to have to go through therapy and stuff like that. Hell, he might even go and like commit suicide because of what he did. And so now we have two people dead, and when he gets down to it, this is really friggin' dark. Friggin' negative. But you all laugh. No, it is funny. It's very, very funny. But that's my point, is that anything when you really dissect it, in terms of humor, is miserable. And it comes from a dark, depressing place. That's why humor is so important. And that's why I think shock humor is just as important as any other type of humor. But again, it can be done wrong, it can be said too early, or even sometimes too late. And it's very important to know how to do it. And the sad thing about shock humor is that you have to do trial and error. And the errors are pretty bad. But, you know, that is the only way to learn it, is to just try it out. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this. It's a VG Cast comic. You know VG Cast? Alright. It was, what they did was they basically did kind of a shock humor analysis on Tom and Jerry, like with their slapstick and stuff. I believe it was Jerry hits Tom in the head with a hammer or something. Basically dropped something on his head. They analyze it, and Tom has got like severe head trauma. He's in the hospital. Jerry's sent to jail.
Well, and that's a good chunk of humor too. It's suddenly bringing realism to a world where that didn't exist, really. You know, and there's great humor to be had that too. But yeah, and that's why I think there definitely is value in it. I don't see any reason why not to talk about this stuff. But there is a time and a place for it, and that's what you must be aware of, because like I said, there's, and I've had people contact me, actually, you know, because I made one or two, you know, Joe with your Ask That Guy, or like, even at NC once in a while, of something that's controversial, like abortion or rape or something like that. And it has happened. And I've had people contact me, I mean, like, victims of rape, that have said, you know, this really, really disturbed me, and I like your stuff, I want to laugh at, but it just is too close to home. And I would write back, and I would say, you know, in long letter, I mean, it's not like, you know, I'm doing it, You know, it's like, no, I would really take the time, I mean, this person's been through a lot, and discuss just the power of what humor is trying to do, and what I'm trying to do with it, and that the idea is not to hurt. If anything, the idea is to help people move on and see the situation and get better and grow stronger from it. I mean, that really is, when you get down to the purpose of humor. That's what humor is trying to do. And a lot of these people, and there's not a ton, I mean, that's not like there's a lot of them that talk to me about it. But, I mean, the few that have, I mean, I have yet to have someone be like, you know, no, you're wrong, I'm still blah, blah, blah. I mean, they usually understand. And even somebody said, you know, it helped them feel better. And once they heard that, they were suddenly sort of put in a better place, and they were trying to find the power to sort of, you know, laugh at what, you know, what we can laugh at as well, just as people. So humor can be a very, very powerful weapon in that way. You know, to help people move on and evolve, and like I said, just heal. So, like I said, and the same thing can be said with gross out humor. And now, I personally am not a fan of a lot of gross out humor. But even I have to acknowledge there's always one or two that can get me, and therefore I acknowledge if it has to work. You bring up Ren and Stimpy. Yeah. Well, I like some of the gross out humor there. The gross out humor is actually the stuff I like the least in that show. But even I have to laugh when Stimpy's looking for his fart at Christmas. You know, I mean, it's like, you can't help it. I mean, it's so stupid and so silly, but it's like, but they're treating it so seriously. And for me, gross out humor doesn't get that funny because a lot of times it's just messy. And messy humor is just, oh, they're messy. They're not really in that much pain. For me, it's all about how much pain a person can be caused. Now, it can work if, say, that person getting messy was obsessive compulsive. And instead of a physical punch to the face, it can be a mental punch. Like, even though, like, maybe the person just doesn't like water being thrown on him, but then maybe he gets drenched, like every ounce of him is filled with water, and knowing his backstory, that can be very, very funny because you know the pain he's going through, and then you see what his reaction is. So it can be funny, but again, most of the time it has to come back to some form of misery, and messy usually isn't that miserable because you can just get cleaned off. The recovery is very quick. It's not even really painful, it's just annoying. Unless there's something else added to it. With that said, I think the last thing we'll talk about here, as we're getting very close to the end here, we'll talk about, and this I think we talked about too, swearing versus not swearing in humor. Here's my opinion on both. Both are funny. I'm not going to act like one is better than the other. I started out swearing up a storm because I couldn't. Because I was in a medium, we were allowed to do it, and we live in, this is that time where TV was still the big thing, and there was just censorship everywhere. And it was great to have a medium where you could say whatever you want, and nobody could hold you back, and if I wanted to say something, I could just say it. So that's why I started off with that. And you can get so creative with swear words, but at the same time, there is a lot of comedy that can come from limitation. Actually, that dude Swade is very good. He doesn't swear, like, at all. So he'll make up these, right? Oh, this sucks a mighty popsicle, And he'll make these analogies, and that's very clever. Technically he's not saying anything wrong, but you can make the connection to what he's talking about. So because of that, it forces you to be more creative and a little bit more smart about it. And the other thing with swear humor too, again, is that there's only so many times you can say these, 6, 7 words or something like that, and just have it be funny. Again, you have to get creative with it. You have to start making combinations, with them and mixing and matching and so forth. So both times you have to be very, very creative, or you have to know when to use them. For example, how many saw X-Men First Class? Wasn't the funniest line in that movie the one time they used the F word? Yeah. I mean, that was ingenious. A brilliant use of that word. It wouldn't be nearly as funny if you put any other word there. That totally made it work, and it made it hilarious. So even just saving that word and knowing when to use it can make a big, big difference. And you, of course, got very creative with your swear words and stuff like that.
And it's like he said too, limitations as well, because I've seen some of the earlier stuff I've done where it almost is a little much. and all of that. But it's also true too in the sense that when you replace it with a G-rated word or something like that, and Patton Oswalt has the bit where he says that can honestly make it a lot creepier. Where when you say to somebody like I'm gonna figure who Howard loves you. A million times creepier than if you were just saying the words. So that makes something like, there's humor that comes from that when you're watching stuff on network television that's censored. It now makes it a comedy, even if it wasn't intended as a comedy. Like the end of Die Hard 2, where the line is, this guy ain't motherfucker, but he says in the thing, he says like, yeah, sayonara, Mr. Falcon. Which is funny, because there's not a Mr. Falcon in the movie, so I don't know what he's talking about.
My other favorite was, he used to dumb, it says, son of a bitch, they say slug in a ditch.
Scumbum is another one they'll say.
Have you guys seen the one for Snakes on a Plane?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what happens when you find a stranger?
So, and those are examples that are made funny even though they're probably not meant to be funny. But with both versions, it doesn't always have to be a bad word. It can just be you work within whatever you're given or whatever you can work with. And just be clever about it. And that's really just to take from everything with this. We talk about these things, and these are not rules. These are just patterns. These are things that we've noticed work. You can take them, you can play with them, do whatever you want with them, trial and error, try it out, try it on people, see what works, see what makes people funny, learn, listen, experiment, just be clever, have fun, and be funny, people. Thank you.